I'm going to be very swift here. You've got a great panel coming up run by Terri Duhon. Terri, as you can read, but just to repeat this, had a stellar career in investment banking before becoming what she is now, which is an author. She's a director of Wise PLC and of Rathbones, of which she's also chair of the risk committee in both cases. She lectures at both London School of Economics and Oxford University. And welcome, Terri. Terri and I met once before online in the very, very early months of lockdown when things were wonderfully different. But thank you for doing today. I'll let you introduce your great panel. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the intro. This is the macro view. And I mean, what's fun, I think of myself as a risk specialist, starting off as a trader on Wall Street, and then now chairing risk committees. I find myself talking about risk, governance, compliance, and now tax. Those are probably all of the most titillating and wildly exciting conversations you can imagine at dinner tables. But we're going to try and make this fun because I think these are super interesting times. And the angle here is all of these different themes, how could they have an impact on what could happen in the world to global tax? But I thought we would start, just out of curiosity, I thought we'd start with 2 polls, if that's okay, just for fun. We're going to ask the audience. Do you believe that globally the tax regimes are converging over the next 5 years or diverging over the next 5 years? That's the first question. So who believes that tax regimes over the next 5 years globally will be converging? Raise your hand. Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. As anticipated, probably. Next question. Who believes globally that taxes will be going up broadly versus going down? So who believes that probably, generally, taxes are going to be going up? So just as a note of order here, you might have just contradicted yourselves a little bit because you've said it's going to diverge but all go up. So there's some interesting angles there. Look, the themes we're going to talk about are we're going to talk about tax as a competitive advantage, and then we're going to try to stay in that lane, and then we're going to try and talk about AI and its impact, and then we're going to look at some of the structural shifts, demographics, et cetera. The economy. With that, I'm going to first let the panel introduce themselves. So please.
I'm James Smith. I'm Chief Economist at the Resolution Foundation. So that's a Westminster think tank that tries to raise living standards.
I'm Ruth Wandhöfer, former Citi banker. I'm independent non-exec director for the last 8 years. I teach at Bayes Business School, FinTech and Banking and Finance, and I advise tax and financial services firms, and I also advise cybersecurity firms.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lee Guy. I spent 37 years in investment banking, trading, structuring, and the last 25 doing risk management at Morgan Stanley and Barcap. I've got some stories there. And before that, DKW. So I spent my career trying to think the unthinkable.
All right. So how's that? So let's start with our first question, and we're going to direct this to James. He's actually the only economist on this panel, just to be clear. The rest of us are...
Don't hate me.
The rest of us are maybe opinionated and less informed, but definitely opinionated. So James, we're going to start with you. And the question is, tax and policy, right? Pretty interesting. In the US, one of the phrases we say during every presidential election is, it's the economy, stupid. So tax is one of the tools you have to build up the economy so that people feel happier and then they want to reelect you, right? So the story goes. So on the other hand, tax could be a competitive advantage to encourage people, industry to come into your location. Let's talk about the home team. We're in the UK, right? What are your views on all of that?
Yeah, so why have a Westminster think tank economist talking about this at all? Well, I think the truth is what's happening on the tax side is going to be driven by what's happening with our politics. So to understand where the answer to that question is going, you have to think about the internal pressures on tax and the external pressures on tax. So on the internal side, lots of doom and gloom about the UK. Obviously, lots of reasons for that. And we're about to embark on another period of political uncertainty, shall we say, as of next Thursday. So there's more of that to come. And but the truth is, the fiscal pressures that we've seen in the UK, that have seen those jittery financial markets, seen Rachel Reeves raise tax for a record amount across 2 huge tax-raising budgets, those are going to intensify as we're aging as a country, kicked by what's happening in the Middle East. So the pressures are, domestically at least, for taxes to rise. But if we look, as Terry was just hinting at, if we look at those global pressures, what we're seeing is something quite different. So as Mark Carney has been saying, we're at the point of a rupture in the cooperative international order, and polarization, blocks cooperating with each other but not across the different blocks. That seems to be more of a feature of the international landscape going forward. And we've seen some cooperation, we've seen data sharing, we've seen some convergence of tax across countries. The big question is what happens going forward? And I think that polarization combined with some pressures from globalization of services, so particularly financial services. So as we go forward in time, technology will mean services can be traded much more across countries. That's just going to mean that those forces are really going to put pressures on taxes to go down, to be used in that competitive way across countries. So you've got a combination of things where domestically we need taxes to go up, and internationally the UK needs to be competitive and reduce taxes, particularly on those tradable services which our economy relies on. So if you put those two things together, what you have is a dwindling tax base from your most productive industries, the ones that are trading internationally, and rising taxes on domestic sources. And the big question I'm going to leave you with is basically whether that's feasible, whether you can see Andy Burnham come in and say, that's what we want to do. We want to cut taxes for the city. We want to raise taxes on working people. So that's the big additional challenge that we're going to have.
But sorry, that sounds evil, right? I mean, honestly, right? I can't imagine anybody hears that and says, oh, well, that's wonderful. Let's tax the individual more and tax the corporate less. How can that be your solution? That just seems wrong. Isn't that wrong?
It's definitely not my solution, but all I'm saying is that's where the pressures are pushing to. So I think you'll see it bubbling up in lots of different places. So you'll see it with talk of wealth taxes. So that's taxing domestic wealth more heavily. So
basically you're saying we're going to tax the rich people, we're going to let the city pay less taxes. It still sounds quite...
I think that will be the direction of the politics. So if you want taxes on globally competitive industries to go down, it's not clear that the politicians have cottoned on to that, but that's the reality of what you might have from the polarization from those globalized services. But if you want that to happen, then it pushes the burden somewhere else.
But your point is that immediately we need the money, so we have to get it somewhere. But if we lower taxes for industry and the city, then we could get more business in, and then people will feel wealthier and they won't be so angry paying the higher taxes. I'm just trying to figure out.
That might be the good news version of that.
That's the good news version. I think this is tricky. So that's the UK perspective. I don't know. Do you have a European perspective on this?
Well, I think the issue with the UK and Europe is that we are in a low growth environment, and we do see other global trends like AI, which we're going to come to in a second, starting to dominate the economic landscape, and that in itself has a number of consequences. I think we will be facing those very unpopular decisions. And the real question is what is actually happening to the workforce, at which level, and how do we avoid further income inequality, which is already something we are deeply in at a global level. What are the chances of the UK and Europe to get it right, to maintain the social fabric and ensure that there is a taxable base? I think when we come to the question of AI, we really look at algorithms, models, intellectual property. Those are the new elements that are generating value and should be taxable. But then you go directly into the question around, do we tax local industry? Do we tax international industry providing services in this market? And just, the reality is that 93% of LLMs are going through US LLM models at the moment. So we have a significant concentration of this emerging economic industrial AI power that is obviously having economic implications on that tax level as well.
So, so we've now swiftly moved into AI.
Indeed.
I think it's hard not to, because that's at the front of everybody's mind. One of the conversations around AI is AI sovereignty, which is all about, I think to some extent, it is about protectionism, which we're seeing rise globally. To some extent, it's just about staying in the game. But there's also some amount of security around the conversation, but there's also a tax angle.
Yeah.
So what do we think about that?
So I think the tax angle is the obvious first level is, of course, that you're replacing more humans in the workforce with AI at certain levels of organizations. That in itself reduces then the income tax base of these individuals that have to go into the gig economy, creating more revenue pressure and margin pressure at that level, which ultimately, when you look at the gig economy being made up for majority cars and driving, if that then swaps into self-driving cars, you sort of have an ongoing sequence of impact at that level. But I think the other element is, of course, that we have now this competitive fiscal issue. So AI itself is not only that tech concern, it really becomes a fiscal issue, and it becomes a global geopolitical question. Who controls it? The EU, of course, has issued an AI Act, which some say is not making it very competitive to develop AI, but it's very much geared towards protecting individuals and users, which is really important if we read of some of the things that we've just heard about, the Google glasses and Meta and what's happening there in terms of data capture and visual identification opportunities. But I think the flip side is, of course, that here we're really looking at, are we moving from taxing labor to taxing capital? And which countries in the world will actually have that capital? If the US and China are dominating AI, what is going to happen to the rest of the world, and how does Europe in particular sustain a social and economic model coherently without being competitive enough to actually market AI? And I think the big piece on AI and also quantum is, of course, energy. So I've been advising the City of London for many years, and of course the City of London would like to be a global leader in AI, but we don't have the energy in this country. So you need to think about, am I going to take a certain part in the value chain? I certainly can't display the whole server ecosystem, semiconductor, etc. But energy becomes a key supply chain question in the AI question mark, really.
In a way, this is the most extreme version of a globalized service. So if you're sitting in a company, you're doing your work, you're opening up Claude, the IP is sitting in the US, the data center could be anywhere in the world. The challenge for the government is, how do you tax that activity that's taking place almost anywhere in the globe? And, it's very difficult we saw Donald Trump talking about the question of how you put tariffs on global services. At the moment, global services have been able to fly under the radar of all this polarization, but the frontier will be, how do you tax that AI activity where it's actually being used by the end user?
So in the UK, an early version of this was the dispute. I think it was around Starbucks. Some of you might remember Starbucks has franchises all over the UK, wasn't actually paying any tax in the UK because, of course, the cost of the franchise, right, was paid back to the US to neutralize any possible tax payments here. That was the claim. So I mean, that's just an early version of this conversation, right? That's just one of the conversations that's already happened. So where do you think we end up? I mean, do you think what's the political,
Well, I think there's, it's interesting. I think countries and their competitive tax positions is an old story, because you said Starbucks, every company, and at least two of us has worked for banks, they spend their entire life trying to minimize their revenue in high tax locations. And I think that's going to happen whether you have AI or don't have AI.
Well, it's already happening.
It's
and
already
it's happened.
happening. So
yes.
I think this is an old problem, and hopefully a lot of people in this room have already got the solutions and are selling them to their clients for significant fees. So for me, it's AI is not about, this creates an even bigger issue of global services. It's about what we do when we have 25% unemployment. And what does that mean do we have UBI or do we have lots of poor people? It's inevitable in my mind. I can't tell you how long. It could be 2 years or 20 years. It's a bit like trying to think of an electron. You can know where it is, but not what state it is. So this is exactly the same. So I think there's inevitably going to have to be a change in the tax system. I'm not sure I'm with James. I can't see a populist party getting voted in that says higher personal taxes, unless it's the Greens, but who knows. So the way I've been thinking about this sort of slightly more macro is just that in my years of a risk manager, I'm a very simple person. I try and make everything a binary problem because then I can choose one. And we're either in we're in a stable equilibrium or an unstable equilibrium. And I think at the moment, we're very much in this unstable equilibrium. We've got some sort of constancy, but it's clearly not going to last because we've got low growth. We should have a high equity risk premium. I have no idea how the markets are this high, but anybody who bets against the market is always poorer than when they started. So never bet against the market. I'll give you Tony Dyer, who very few of you are old enough to remember him. He predicted the crash for a very long time, and he died about a month before the 87 crash. Anyway, so we've got should have a high risk premium. We've got anemic growth, which I don't think, given the political and geopolitical instability, is going to change. So the revenue side of governments is poor. We've got an electorate who demand greater level of services than the countries can afford. And that's why you have populist politics, because they're going to deliver the solutions, even if they maybe don't have the solutions. So you've got a demand. The demand exceeds the supply. So people are going to have to expect less, which I don't think is an easy sale, or there's going to have to be more money raised. Now, as you look across Europe, you look across the globe, I mean, the government tax system or the government borrowing system is the biggest Ponzi scheme ever. This is my personal opinion, not necessarily the opinion of the presenter. So, and a lot of the governments are already vastly over borrowed, in my opinion. So their capacity for me to borrow more money is limited. And so anemic growth, low income, demand for greater things, inability to raise money via borrowing leads to only one outcome: more taxes.
Okay. So I think probably that's everybody's worst nightmare is what you've just described. But I think if you take a step back and let's say that what you've just described is where we end up, presumably if we thought a little more carefully about it, every jurisdiction, there's a way to think about what tax should look like that could change that outcome. James, you're the economist.
Make it work.
Let's make it work.
Well, I don't know. I'm less pessimistic than this. So in a world where we've got 25% unemployment, what you're describing is AI's extremely successful technology. It's replacing human labor. You've got incredibly fast productivity growth. And, this is the process of delivering, Keynes's 2-day week. So very...
No, I'm sorry. I just look, let me just be more stark, okay? The U.S. and China own AI. Nobody else has the energy to do it. Nobody else has the setup. Nobody else has the people. Okay, I'm just going to throw it out there. You may disagree, but that's kind of where we are right now. So in your future state, when 25% unemployment, in the U.S. and China, they are able to have UBI, universal basic income, because they've got the revenue to tax and they can pay everybody to be happy. I don't think that works anyway, but let's assume that's the case. In the rest of the world, you've got 25 plus unemployment. You've got very unhappy young people who are going to start the next world war, because that's what they do if they don't have a purpose, if they don't have something to do. I'm here to be a little bit provocative.
And you called me pessimistic. You've got a third world war.
Okay.
I know. I mean, I'm just saying.
I just said there was unemployment.
But hang on. Look. I mean, look. These are real, real cycles that have happened in the past. I'm not saying that that's where we are. I'm just being provocative. How do we fix this?
But I think what we have to add to the discussion, which we haven't really drawn out yet, is the whole demographic time bomb, right? We had in the 80s 4 working people against 1 retiree. Now we will have soon 1 or 2 working people against 1 retiree. And I think when we add to this, I think we have potentially, yes, young people starting war, but we also have increased health expenditure and retirement things. And then maybe the sort of light at the end of the tunnel that not every job in healthcare and, old age care can be done by AI, because we also have, of course, that reduction of the workforce in the Western economies, which again means more immigration, or it means replaced by robots, right? So we have a number of things that are also in the scenario.
But none of those are, you're actually making my scenario worse.
I know, I do.
Right? You're not actually giving us hope. Again, if this is a possible future, what should we all be doing now? Is AI sovereignty the answer? And then do you use AI sovereignty and do you overlay that with a local, with a individual jurisdictional tax structure within the AI sovereignty plan? Is that possible?
So Terri, help me here, because the US and China, and then chuck in a few other Asian countries, dominate the production of chips.
Yes.
And the world isn't suffering because the Americans and the Koreans make all the chips. I mean, AI itself it's a vessel. You open up your Claude for the first day and it knows nothing. It can do stuff, it can answer questions, but it doesn't technically know nothing. So I'm slightly less pessimistic in that regard, because one can view AI as a means by which ideas are translated into outcomes. And the UK has got ideas. So if you can actually say competitively not necessarily as a provider of AI, but as an intense user, as long as we have access, we're going to generate products we can then sell internationally and hopefully generate revenue for the country that way. The nature, though, of employees will be far few technical people, a lot more, hopefully, people with ideas, and then a lot of things where you actually have to do something. Mind you, having said that, these robots are pretty cool now. They run marathons, stuff, you've all seen it. So maybe physical, but we're not really considering the physical actions will be taken over by.
So hope springs eternal then.
Well, I'm a risk guy, so I'm supposed to think at the end of the world. But I think the reality is, the UK is a tech thing. It does have a lot of smart people. We do have great education. So as long as we invest in education, as long as we have a tax system that's pro-entrepreneurs and pro-ideas, which I'm not sure it is, then perhaps we can facilitate more ideas.
So your solution is education.
Yep.
Pro-entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Pro-ideas.
Yes.
I love that, by the way. I love that. Just to be clear, as I know I might sound American, but I have been in this country for 27 years. So this is my home. I'd really like to see it successful, be it successful. And I do think we have. I teach at the LSE in Oxford. I see unbelievably smart people from all over the world, frankly. I think it's entirely capable it's entirely possible, a completely different outcome. You're absolutely right.
And I would argue, even in the context of the energy situation, I mean, this is where entrepreneurial and research to look at alternative energy sources, which can be unearthed with enough research and use of AI, is that could be a cutting element, because certain things will have to be backfilled at a more sovereign and regional level because we currently don't have them. And I think that world order of the last 30, 40 years where Europe would build on US tech and take a certain element of the value chain is slowly changing, but in my view has more rapidly got to change to really bring back the IP creation and the delivery. And it goes even into the capital markets question around making sure that maybe more firms stay in Europe and the UK in terms of listing and capital markets, as opposed to just moving to the US.
The capital markets has another theme running through it, which is that the shift, the massive shift from publicly listed entities through to private is unbelievable over the last 10 years. And so that, that's another shift that we haven't even talked about. And that actually changes the tax landscape significantly. Particularly when you have these huge private equity businesses that are sitting in where their LPs are mostly sitting in tax-efficient jurisdictions. So that changes the landscape of what the capital gains tax looks like, for example.
I've just had a little brainwave in terms of how tax has been used today is a technical instrument. It is often in relation to optimizing, obviously, for firms around the world to minimize the actual taxable income. But I think tax has to be more intelligently deployed now as a tool to reshape society, because we have to manage the geopolitical challenges, the aging demographics, the taxable income base reduction potential with some of those changes in the market. It becomes more of a social, corporate, and governmental responsibility tool. And I'd like to encourage people to think about it that way, which ultimately supports corporate governance.
No, I love that. I love
on that side,
but
right?
Again, what do we walk away with? Because it's a great idea, but then practically, what does it mean? Does it mean investing more in education? Does it mean reducing some of the services we provide otherwise? Does it mean providing tax breaks for entrepreneurs and for startups and for business ventures in the UK? Does it mean encouraging more venture capital to come and start up here? Is that what it means? Do you think we could get that through?
It means all of those.
Yeah. It means all of those. So
Yeah.
James, how are we going to make that happen?
Yeah. So I feel like we're all on the same page now. So we're describing,
Awesome.
we're describing different things here. So when you're talking about AI, you're talking about tech that's making us more productive. So this is the economist's view of things. This is the process of us getting rich. But the question is, who gets rich off the back of it? So we have literally an arms race between China and the US about who's producing AI, and maybe those are the only two countries that get rich off the back of this. But the frontier here is how to, as I was sort of talking about at the start, how to tax those services that are happening in other parts of the world, but you're being used domestically. So that means giving tax breaks to firms who are in those industries to make them as competitive as possible. But at the same time, you have all of the things we've just described. Now, the positive view is we're richer, so we can pay higher taxes, and we'll all be sitting back, reading books, sitting on the beach, bringing our dividends in. That'll all be a beautiful world that we're in.
I'm still not sure about giving you all too much free time. Honestly,
we could just tax all the data centers. That's the future.
I think the thing we also can't forget is just taking a step back. 15 years ago, the fintech revolution is here in London, right? The global disruption and transformation of the financial services landscape really is here in London. So that there are, I think if you look at each jurisdiction, you can find something pretty spectacular that they bring to the table. And so if you look at it and say, well, clearly something's already working in this space, let's encourage it. That's that. And also, let's not forget, some of the greatest minds in AI
Touring, right? I mean, just
came from here.
yeah.
At Oxford and Cambridge, and not that they're the only universities that exist in the UK. I know there are many amazing places. So I think there's a lot. So why don't let's do a quick poll just for the audience for fun. So who believes that your job is going to exist in 3 years' time?
Oh, look
That
at this
is
optimism.
very
That's awesome.
optimistic. I love it. But maybe that's because of what Ali started with, which is that you provide judgment. And at the moment, judgment is hugely valuable human part of the experience. Let's ask
About
another.
10 years.
Well, 10 years? Well, no, of course it's not going to be in 10 years. 10 years? No, a few brave souls. But let's ask a different question. Have you recently increased or decreased your junior hiring? Who has increased their junior level hiring? Absolutely. I'm with you, by the way. This is the conversation.
This is the issue, yeah.
Do we have a pyramid structure in organizations, or is it a diamond shape? And when you look at this diamond shape, you think, well, how do you get senior people if you don't have any people at the bottom? Obviously, there are a few large organizations that are doubling down on junior people, actually. And I believe in the human. I love AI, but I do believe in the human.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Well, I think we need to find ways to start taxing those digital services that are provided from the US, China, and elsewhere in a way that doesn't get us too blocked by Trump's or any future US governmental trade tariffs, because I think that's the balancing act, right? We need to kind of start introducing it without being blocked in that way, because we've seen in the last few years that things have changed quite dramatically with the tariffs. And I think that is the risk we need to sort of navigate and agree on. How do we raise that base? Yeah.
James?
I'm an optimist. I think the future if you take the experience of past technological advancement, that's what's got us richer. It's about managing this process, and as we've just been talking about, tax has to evolve, but it can evolve to deal with this.
Lee?
I guess I'll leave you with one thought, and I didn't think I'd be saying this, but I think tax is actually going to be quite interesting for the next 5 to 10 years.
That's right.
Let's leave on that. Let's end on that. Tax is going to be super interesting. Let's have hope springs eternal, right? I believe in us, our ability to solve these things without resorting to something terrible. So go us, right? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.